Steve Sketches, what up? Yeah, I didn't plan on that happening, and my alarm didn't go off. So gotta love Twitch not telling me that there's a raid. Um, Hello everybody, and welcome to Adventures in History. I apologize for not being here when you all showed up. Um, Twitch is being a jerk and not telling me that people are around. So hey everybody, if you don't know who I am, my name is Shane. The show is Adventures in History, you see right here. And what we do is we talk history, and we have fun and goof off. And we show pictures of people from the ancient world, like this guy, who's actually supposed to be over here like this. But, you know, OBS and Twitch, they have minds of their own, and things happen and get moved around a little bit. But, you know, there you go. There's a Japanese emperor. And we'll talk about that guy in just a second. Let's see. Steve, thank you so much for the raid. If you all are in the room and you're not already following Steve, even though Steve is clearly the majority of the population here, you should definitely go give Steve a follow. He's a great dude, good friend. I'm sure not the only historical example of a premature invasion. This is true. Let me catch up with everybody and say hello, though. Magnificent. Good to see you. Nix, hello, hello, hello. Steve, thanks again. You forgot about... I forgot to start streaming today and remembered about 45 minutes late. Okay, well, there we go. Everything is fine. Everything is fine here. Everything is fine here. What's up, Uncle Bill? Good to see you, my friend. Tuna, howdy, howdy. It's probably not your intro screen. Yeah, it's probably not on my intro screen. That's true, that's true, that's true. We haven't visited Japan in a while. Yeah, we've been around the world and back again. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Zagdraws, thank you so much for that follow, and welcome to the adventure, my friend. Konnichiwa, hello. Dun, 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 dun. Steve is many, Steve is one. Soup, what's going on? How's it going? Tuna, I'm the only one, me or mods are the only people that can do shoutouts. I mean, I guess I could give VIP shoutout privileges. Give me some rapid fire premature invasion, Shane. Oh man. Okay, so premature invasion. The beginning of the United States Civil War. The Union was not ready for the fight that they ran into. They needed many more men. And that first Battle of Bull Run was pretty bad for them, and they ended up having to retreat. Let's see, premature invasion. Ooh, these are tougher than they seem. So in Rome, when we are at the very end of the world in the West, the 470s, it's actually the late 460s. There is an emperor who's trying to go out and fight the Huns. And he doesn't wait for his cavalry support to show back up. And he sees the barbarians out there, and he's like, oh, we got this, no problem. We're going to go beat these barbarians up. And the barbarian cavalry kind of comes out of the woods because they were all foraging. And he ends up getting flanked by the barbarian cavalry and then gets killed. So this is in the... Nope, I'm sorry, that's not in the 400s. That's in 376, because it's the Battle of Adrianople, because that's where Valentinian gets killed. I apologize. He rushed into battle too quickly there. Jin Dynasty versus the Kingdom of Goguryeo in Korea. They invaded 3 times before they finally got their act together and then successfully invaded. Lots of messy stuff. I would say that you can't make shout-outs at the moment. Did I not make a shout-out? I thought I'd shouted out Steve. Did I not shout out Steve? Oh. Let me see if it... Well, maybe the whole problem is with Streamlabs. Because that's going crazy, though. Because why would my follow alerts work, but my shout-out commands would not work? Maybe CloudBot here is having a bit of a brain fart. Let me turn old CloudBot on and off again. CloudBot has decided to turn itself off. Because, because that's what we do. And there we go. Now I've turned it back on, and there's my lovely wife with the shout out for Steve. Yeah, I just turned the bot back on. Leroy Jenkins of history, indeed. The Bay of Pigs? Yeah, that was a bad premature invasion. Zagdraw says this sounds like a good idea for a channel you're in. Okay, cool. Well, bring it on in. Takes a capable woman to save the day. She is absolutely the better part of the marriage relationship. I believe that 1 and 1 makes 2, but her portion is somehow still significantly more than mine. All right, so yeah, we're in a new phase. Now, for those of you that might be here for the first time, you have no idea what the devil that I'm talking about. But on Thursday nights, since about 2.5 years ago, all right, Steve, have fun at the park. Tell the Rose Fairy that I said hello, and hopefully sometime soon, man, we can hang out and do some stuff and try to catch back up. I know it's been really weird. Life is just a swamp right now. I do eat more than you do. History can't lick technology. Say it ain't so. Well, Uncle Bill. Yeah, I feel you. Okay, so we have been going through history in chronological order. And we started all the way back when we developed these things, these opposable thumbs. And we've made it all the way through the 700s, or all the way to the 700s, which is, a pretty remarkable feat if we look at all of human history. We've been at this now, again, for about 2.5 years. So it's taken a little while to get where we are, but we chunk up history in what I've called phases, because I stole this from Marvel movies, right? Phase 1, phase 2. So we are currently in phase 13, bum-ba-da-bum, which is the 8th century. So this is the year 701 to the year 800, right? So this is the good old 8th century. And because we can't cover everything that happens in a century year by year, because nothing would make sense, we do it by region, right? We pick a region, and then we'll look at what's going on in this area during this century. So right now, we are looking at Japan in the 8th century. Now, if you come back next Thursday, we'll be looking at Korea and this northern Asian area. And then if you come back the week after that, we'll be looking at China in the 8th century, right? So you get the idea. We're looking at regions during the century, and we will work our way all the way across the continents. Get down here, get down in here and do some Africa stuff, get up here and do some Europe stuff. We'll actually catch back up with England for the first time in a couple of phases, because they've been arguing with themselves, but they're pulling themselves together. We'll get over here in the New World. Last stream, we were talking about the New World in the 7th century. So we talked about what's going on down here in South America and Central America and North America. So we do world history, and I think it's pretty fun. But tonight we are talking about Japan. You can see it here, the land of Japan. There are VODs going back 2 years for that. Yes, there are, Soup. I actually spent, oh my gosh, probably an hour and a half or so trying to organize those on Sunday. And so if you go to my VOD page, I've made collections. There's a collection that's called Adventures in History, and that has the VODs from like episodes 1 to like 90 something. And I'm going to have to make another collection so that I can put the rest of the episodes in another collection. But all of the well, not all of them. I have missed saving 7 or 8 VODs along the way, because they do expire, and sometimes I just get really busy and I forget, oh, you got to go save it. So we have 115 episodes so far, because this is episode 115. But we also have viewer request episodes where viewers like you can suggest a topic, and we talk about it here on stream. And we're in the high 60s of those. Uh, Normally we do those every other Tuesday. I have not been as able to produce those at the speed that I would like. Work this semester has been kicking my tail, so it's hard for me to produce viewer request episodes, especially when it's stuff that I don't know off the top of my head, and then I have to do a little research on to make sure that I'm being accurate. It just so happens that I needed to do a little bit of research on this. We were supposed to do one Tuesday night, but Daria, I'm Spartacus. Daria, it's so good to see you. Also, I'm glad that you got back into your account. No, you're Spartacus. Daria, it's good to see you. I will give you the shout out, and this will act as social pressure for you to come stream. So everybody should go follow Daria, because she is an amazing artist and a delightful individual that you will enjoy watching stream when she does stream. And we're having some sort of we're having some double I'm Spartacus moment here. I don't know what's going on. Oh boy, not social pressure. Daria is a really great artist, though, and a good friend. Your one weakness. People expect this of you, Daria. I'm just picking. You do whatever you need to do, because I know that you're super busy. But thank you very much for the subscription. It is very much appreciated, and I'm very glad to see you. Hope that you're doing well. 8th century Japan is only one mother and 41 grandmothers ago if you say that the average age of childbirth is 25. So Meg doing a little bit of evolutionary biological generation mapping here for us. That's not that far away back in time, right? Just 41 grandmothers. What up, Chad Guy? Good to see you. Hope you're having a good one. Yeah, so let's do some art. Shane, do you know the history of car insurance? No, but I know that you can save at least 15% of it by switching to Geico. Because I've been conditioned to say that. Car insurance, like most insurance, is something that came out of the post-World War II era, where people were starting to charge a whole bunch of stuff for things that didn't really need charging for. It's very much that economic boom of the 50s and 60s. It's also when we figured out how to do banking. All of that stuff sort of gets wrapped up in the same big bubble. That we fixed stuff in the 40s, and then it got going pretty well in the 50s, and then it was booming in the 60s. Yup. Let me make sure that I got all of this stuff. I licked some technology once. You won't believe how shocked I was. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I love it. What up, Cave Geek? I see you saying holy crap there. Let me give Cave Geek a shout out. Gotta go give Cave Geek a follow. This guy's good dude, does cool art, and you'll have a good time. And he knows a little bit of embarrassing stuff about me now, I guess, because I've been around for a little bit. Or I've hung out with him in person now a little bit more, so he's gaining more dirt on me. I'm going to have to keep an eyeball on this guy. For a good time, call Cave Geek. Get him to do a reading for you when you get on his stream. Anyway, so let's talk Japan. Now, where we left off last time, Japan had really gotten its act together. The imperial structure had, solidified its hold on the government, and they had really firmly taken a grasp of things. This is during the period of time where they were reforming a lot of stuff. They had some really big political figures, like a guy named Shotoku, who was bringing a lot of stuff over from China and really pushing a lot of reforms through that were going to end up reshaping Japan and very firmly putting the emperor at the top of the heap. And this period that we're going to talk about is really going to just even more sort of double down on that. But we're also going to start seeing during this period of time a push towards a more authentic individual Japanese identity. So this is a really interesting time period, and we call this rough area the Nara period because that's where the capital is, but we're not quite there yet. We're going to start by talking about a guy named Monmu. If I get Emperor Monmu, and he is this guy. Dun dun dun. So this is the Emperor Monmu. Now, was he that like weird looking? No, he's wearing very poofy clothes, right? So these he's not some giant Jabba the Hutt looking dude. This is just very poofy clothing, right? So he's got his cool top knot going. He's got his big poofy clothes that look at how comfy he is. Sitting on a dais, you know, he's the dude. He's the dude. Now, what is up with this guy? Well, he rules at the period of time where we're crossing over from the 7th century to the 8th century. So he takes over in 697, and then he's going to rule for 10 years until 707. Is that a beanbag? No, that is his big, poofy-legged sort of pant structure thing. They have these really big bell-bottomed legs. Puffy equals powerful, right? Look how big my clothes are. These are like OG Jinko jeans, Tuna, if you know what I'm talking about, which I'm sure that you do because you lived through that period just like I did, right? What's up, Green Herring? Good to see you, my friend. So, Monmu is going to be a big beneficiary of these reforms that come out of the 7th century because he's going to be in a very powerful position as emperor, and he's going to go several steps further to make that even more powerful. And one of the things that he's going to bring into being is this committee. What, Jinko all the way? Called the Daijokan. Okay, so what the devil is the Daijokan? So if you're familiar with basically executive structures in the modern world, you typically have an executive, you know, like we have the president or the prime minister, right, wherever you are. And then that person has a cabinet that's, you know, sort of their adjutants and supporters of these big divisions of the government, right, like division of treasury and war and or military or defense or justice or whatever, right? So the Daijokan is actually the Imperial Japan version of a cabinet. And this is a system of ministers. There are 8 of them. And this is, you know, your good old stuff, like your emperor's adjutant for war or for the legal system or for the treasury. There's one that maintains the imperial household. There's also sort of a chief executive. So this was kind of like a vice president position, but you didn't really get to be emperor. So you're not like vice emperor. You're not next in line to be emperor. This is sort of more like a glorified chief of staff. So this person is very, very important. They are over all of the other ministers, but they're all still under the emperor. And these were chosen from usually loyal, noble families. And if you got into these positions, this was a big deal. Powerpuff Girls, power confirms. Right? Indeed. Jinko all the way. What's up, Shmonite? Good to see you. You love the Powerpuff Girls? I do too. The mod squad and I were actually just talking either yesterday or the day before. I guess it must have been yesterday. About how great like our era of Cartoon Network was, and Powerpuff Girls got brought up. Yes, so these are the Knights of the Round Table, Chad. That's a very good parallel. So these are the right-hand people that you're going to turn to in times of need, that are going to be there to back you up, that are supposed to be in charge of things, that are supposed to be respectful and support you. And when things go bad, these are the guys that are going to have your back. Here's the thing, though. The Daijokan is going to last for centuries. It is something that lasts all the way up until the end of the imperial era when we switch over to full-out shogunates. And then it actually even does have a brief period of time where it gets restored under the imperial system in the Meiji Restoration in the mid and late 1800s. So this is a really big sort of facet of Japanese government, and Monmu is going to use this to further consolidate his power, right? He's only going to pick people for these positions that are going to support him. He's only going to pick the biggest and most powerful nobles that are going to line up with him. And then when he gives them this title, he kind of has them in a bind because he gave them the title. That means he can also take that title away if they're being shady or if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And later emperors will actually use this to their benefit. They will promote people into these positions that are not necessarily their best of friends as a way to exercise social and political leverage over them, right? I'm going to promote you to a mid-level Daijokan position, and then you're going to have to decide, do you want to continue arguing against me or do you want to keep this position? Because these positions could be hereditary if you played your cards right, and you might be benefiting your family for the next, 10 generations if you did what you were supposed to do. So this is a really crafty way of making sure that the emperor gets to sit at the top and doesn't get challenged a lot. Now, this is going to also create the need for a lot of new bureaucratic positions, because when we create these different ministries, you're going to have people that work for those ministries. So this is creating yet more system of basically cronyism, if you will, or we're going to give this to our buddies. This is the spoil system in the 1800s and 1900s America, where I got elected, so all my buddies get positions, right? Same kind of thing. But at the top of the apex is Monmu, who runs the whole show and can tell you can't give that person this job. So this is, again, quite a bit of a flex here. Now, what's going to be really interesting with Monmu is that he recognizes that things needed to change a little bit. And this new era is going to need a new face on it. So he brings in a whole bunch of architects and a whole bunch of people that are really good and knowledgeable individuals about how things in China are done, and he decides he wants to build a new capital, right? New capital cities are interesting situations here because you are figuratively moving the government, but you're also literally moving the government. So you are starting new, and who you invite to the new capital with you is another way to control things, right? If you don't get invited to build a house in the new capital city, this is a big slap in the face. And this is another way for the emperor to kind of control who's his buddy and who isn't. So we're going to start building a new capital. Well, unfortunately for Monmu, he doesn't make it out. He has a couple of very young children, but he dies young, and it doesn't seem like there are any, foul play things involved here. People just die young in the historical time all the time. It's what happens, right? So when he dies, we get an interesting situation where his mother takes over. Her name is Empress Geme. Now, this had not been frequently the situation, right? We've had empresses before. It was not completely unheard of, but it was something that wasn't common. The problem with Monmu's children is they were both very, very, very young, right? So they would not have been able to rule anyway, but his mother, who was actually also his first cousin, but we won't get into how all of the family stuff wraps in. This is Empress Geme. She decides, I'm just going to be empress. And the people kind of figure out, okay, this will be okay. This is fine. We'll let her in. She's in the right family. She's kin to the emperor. She's actually kin to the emperor in a couple of different ways, but that's Not necessarily the exact situation that we're looking at here, but she's going to take over as a ruling empress. And again, this isn't something that was completely new, but it was something that was rare. There are only about 8 or 9 individual ruling empresses in the entire span of Japanese imperial politics. So it's not super common. But she's very qualified. She takes the reins and she just goes right for it and does a really good job. So one of the things that she starts trying to do is expand the imperial presence, right? We know that we have a certain amount of territory, and it's actually fair for us to sort of look at what the imperial control looked like. If we look at the whole island chain right here, so the Japanese archipelago actually starts way up here, and then it runs all the way down here. At the time, when we're talking here, this, if we're looking specifically, Empress Genmei takes over in 701. I'm sorry, 707. Not 701, 707. The imperial control extended over this island right here, which is Kyushu, this island right here, which is Shikoku, and then about 2/3 or so of the big island of Honshu here. Now, some of these smaller islands had also been kind of lumped in under the imperial power structure, but at that point, the emperor did not control the entire archipelago. That actually came much, much later. But up here in the north and in the wider imperial world, Japan wanted to make its feel like it wanted to put the impression that it was a power, it was a player in the game. And one of the things that ends up happening here is a little bit of a stronger connection with people going on in Korea. Now, we won't go too far into this because we'll talk about it also from the Korean point of view next week. But there was a kingdom in Korea that had become very successful during the 7th century. They're called the Shilla. And they are going to open up some dialogue with Genmei, and we're going to have some trade here. We're going to have some good communication and some back and forth. And we're going to share a little bit of culture and a little bit of money, a little bit of trade goods, and especially those nice quality trade goods. So your king gets some cool stuff from over here, and my empress gets some cool stuff from over there. And, good old-fashioned stuff. She is also going to be the one that manages to move into the new capital. Now, I can give you this. If I could type. The name of the city in Japanese at that time was Heijokyo. Now, we today call it Nara, and that's where the Nara period comes from. So this is the new capital city that her son was working on while he was alive. They're actually going to move into Heijokyo, or Nara, when she takes over. And this is a big, important move. Again, because this is not just we're moving, it's also everybody's moving. This starts a new period of time. This is in 710. So the Nara period starts here at 710. Genmei's reign is going to be really important for a few other things too, especially some really neat cultural advances. And you know me, I'm all about some interesting cultural stuff. One of the most important things that comes out of her larger cultural period is this thing called the Kojiki. The Kojiki is one of the first big collections of Japanese writing. And it is a creation story that carries the beginning of the world all the way up through about the end of the 500s to an empress named Suiko. If you've been around, you might recognize her name. Now, what's culturally important about the Kojiki is this is if it's not the first, it is one of the earliest big, complete works of Japanese mythology and historical record. And this is not something that had been seen before. Now, Japan has been an imperial power for arguably around this time, 220, 250 years, right? But this is the first time that somebody has decided we need to put together all of our stories, and we need to put together some of our history, and we need to show where we're coming from. So this indicates, at least on the the academic or the what we might call upper crust level of Japanese society, this indicates a recognition that they need this. Because if you look at Korea at this time, they had really good detailed King's Chronicles. If you look at China, they've got written records that go back, at this point, over 2,000 years. So Japan didn't have that. But if we're trying to be in the game, if we're trying to be one of the powers, if we're trying to sort of play the larger cultural role that we think we deserve, we need things like histories of ourselves. We need these documents that we can look to say, here's our history, here's our origin. So the Kojiki comes out in 712. Really cool stuff. If you've never read the Kojiki, you can find it online, full text translation for free. It's pretty neat stuff. So you get to hear about the mythological founding of the islands and the gods, and you get to hear a lot of their old Japanese mythology stories about how the gods came to be and how the different gods interacted. You get to figure out where the islands came from. There's a story of how the individual islands were made. You find out a lot of stuff about the cool items. So the kind of the crown jewels of the imperial household are these 3 items that supposedly go all the way back to the period of the gods. And you can figure out the origin story of those. I don't want to tell you all these stories because I'm hoping that by me saying some of this, you're going like, I should go look that up. That sounds pretty cool. Because I'd like to tell you some stuff, but I'd also like you to go, it might be worth looking up, right? If you don't want to, that's fine. I can tell you the stories too. I've got a copy of the Kojiki right on the other side of this wall. It's right about here. I love me some Japanese history. So the Kojiki is a pretty big deal. Now, so Genmei is going to see a lot of these changes happen. She's going to promote a lot of this stuff happening. And Genmei is also one of the few rulers that has an identifiable tomb from this period of time. So this is a little shrine that is outside of her tomb, which is right back here. What would you say separates mythology from religion, or even ancient religion? Okay, Zach, that's a great question. So mythology specifically, and this is going to get kind of semantic, but I mean, you asked the question, right? So mythology is a genre of writing. So the specific purpose of the genre of mythology is to explain things that we don't understand. Now, that means mythology can be religious, but mythology also doesn't have to be religious, right? So like in America, we have mythology of our own. We have, George Washington threw a silver dollar across the Potomac River, and we have Abe Lincoln couldn't tell a lie, and we have, Paul Bunyan and Babe the Big Blue Ox and Pecos Bill and Alfred Bulltop Stormalong and all of these stories, Johnny Appleseed, right? So those are attempts to explain things that, to show how they got the way that they are, or to explain something that we don't understand, right? So that is a genre of mythology. Now, the difference between mythology and religion is that religion is a set of beliefs, right? So if we are looking at what we believe in, we might use mythology to explain our religious beliefs. In that situation, people typically don't like to use the word mythology because they believe very ardently that their particular beliefs are accurate and historical, and that's the way that they really happened. So the real disconnect here is that a lot of people that are religious don't like using the word mythology because it implies that it's made up. Now, some people are okay with that. If you get into, especially like the academic world, you find some academic people that are, say, Christian, right? They might read parts of the Bible and go, oh yeah, that beginning part of Genesis where there's like the flood and the creation, that's written in the mythological genre. Because it is. And I'm not trying to say anything about anybody's religion, but genre speaking, it is. Now, do those people then believe that that is accurate to the way that it happened? Some of them do. Many of them believe that to be literally word for word the truth. But there's a difference there. So according to the Japanese culture, what's in the Kojiki isn't falsified data. It's just the way that things got started, and it actually blends over time from not provable mythological genre up to more provable historical chronology. So the Kojiki is this really interesting book that starts off with basically no proof and in a mythological genre. And as it goes and it tells the story of how the gods did these things, and then the first god was the first emperor, he founded the imperial family, and the emperors were this, and this emperor did that, and that emperor did that. These events that happen in these emperors' lives start becoming more and more concretely provable, right? And then by the time we get to like the middle or late 500s, we can actually start putting actual chronological dates. Like, we know that this person was a real person, and we know that they were born here and died here. So when Japanese people at the time were looking at the Kojiki, what they were looking at in their minds is a historical account that began with the creation of the world and carried all the way up through the imperial line, and it switched around the 2/3 mark from being a purely mythological genre to a historical genre. It's called a chronicle, where you have a king and then the events of his reign. That makes a lot of sense, and it makes sense that the older these ideas are, the more these ideas are spoken about as mythology rather than a religious aspect. Right. Especially, like you go way, way back in history, when we don't have archaeological data to back a lot of this stuff up, we have word of mouth, which can't be completely discredited by itself, because word of mouth can contain a lot of truth and a lot of historical truth. Oral traditions should never be completely abandoned. And even mythology can tell us things that are true. Like, a lot of people thought that the story contained in the Iliad, the big war between the Mycenaeans and the Trojans, never happened. And then we found Troy, and there was a big battle, right? So we can't even count out that mythology holds grains of truth. The issue is trying to sift those grains out from the stuff that we can't prove, right? So it's a really fascinating thing here, and I know that gets into like literary critique and source criticism and stuff like that, but that's my thing, right? I really enjoy that area. Thank you, Shmal Knight. Everybody's welcome to follow up on this stuff. I love chasing rabbits and doing tangent stuff like that, so anytime you all have questions, by all means, just let me know. I am going to take a sip of tea here, so... That's good tea. All right, so Genmei, pretty cool, lots of powerful stuff, and when it gets time for her to go, she is going to pass the throne to her daughter. Now, this is an interesting moment here. In Japanese history, again, there aren't very many women empresses. Not because they had inherent issues with that necessarily. I don't know. There were definitely gender issues about, female gender people running the country. It was a very male-oriented society, but it wasn't verboten, right? It wasn't impossible to do. But what we don't see very often at all is one empress passing the throne to another empress, especially when there were males that could inherit the throne, right? So when Genmei decides to, give up the throne, she passes this down to her daughter, Gensho. Now, let's not forget that her son, so Genmei's son, was Monmu. He was the guy that we started with. And he had 2 kids that were both sons. So at this point, there are 2 princes. But we have Genmei passing through the 2 princes to get to Gensho. This is really interesting. And this is something that shows, again, just kind of how different this period of Nara is. It's a period of a lot of change and a lot of cultural shifting. That's definitely helped me understand it a lot. You shall refrain from daily. No, you derail as much as you want to. If you hang around long enough, there'll probably be something that pops up here in chat that says, like, no, for real, ask questions. I really seriously don't mind at all. It's okay. That's what I'm here for. I'd rather talk about stuff that I know that you all are super interested in than this stuff that I'm super interested in that you all might just be passing knowledge of, right? So, let me show you Gensho. Here we go. This is Empress Gensho. again, the poofy means the powerful, right? This is, of course, a very big kimono dress here, with big flowing sleeves that come down this way, and this would be the big trailing skirts that are behind it. And the high forehead, this actually is not... you can tell here that there's a little bit of gray, because the really big forehead thing was actually kind of in vogue. So a lot of ladies kind of shaved back their hairline to get this really round looking face at this time, which is interesting, and I don't know if that's a fad that will ever catch back on, but it was a thing back at that time. So just little cultural nuggets for you here and there. All right, so what's up with Gensho? How is she going to do stuff? All right, well, she is going to be Empress from 715 to 724. And again, she's Monmu's sister, and she's Genmei's daughter, but there are princes there, right? There are princes that had been passed over, and we need to kind of keep that in the back of your head. Now, during her reign, a lot of these changes that had been happening are going to start sort of not breaking down, but there are going to be periods of time where it starts dropping frames, right? Or the motor is going to skip a cycle, or the timing belt's going to slip, right? And one of the issues that is going to be of biggest issue or primary concern is how land is being used in Japan. So if we go back to the 7th century, the 600s, one of the things that had happened under a guy named Shotoku was that the emperor basically confiscated all of the land of the country. In a way that hairstyle has lived on, it's called the skullet. Oh man, I don't even know what a skullet is. I don't think I want to look that up. Oh man, that's going to be something that would haunt my dreams, I bet. Anyway, so all of the land was owned by the emperor, and when you died, all of the land reverted back to the emperor, and then your heir had to go to the emperor and say, "Hi, emperor, might I live on the land that I currently live?" And then the emperor had to give you permission. Now, what happened as a result of this, if we fast forward, 80 years later, a lot of the nobles were not particularly very interested in working the land. Why should they invest into these plots of land when they might not get it and they might not be able to pass it down, right? Why should I waste my family's money on something that I can't guarantee that I can keep? And this is a fair point, right? If I spend all of my fortune working this plot of land and developing this plot of land, and then, I do some minor faux pas and the emperor decides your family doesn't get that land next generation, that's money that I have wasted, right? I mean, it's just pretty basic investment management here, right? So one of the things that becomes very much aware is that the food production has started to drop a little bit here. And we're not at full out panic mode yet, but the Daijokan, the leadership team, really starts impressing on Gensho, like, look, we really need to do something to try to encourage these nobles to invest in reclaiming some of this land, because a lot of the land that was arable farmland, like you could use it to grow food on, had been allowed to just sort of overgrow, and they weren't clearing it, they weren't growing it, they weren't keeping it around. They were trying to find ways to shift land or shift ownership of stuff to things that they could hold on to. So what are we going to do? Well, they passed some land legal changes here, and instead of the land reverting after one generation, they kicked it out a couple of generations. So now the land doesn't revert to the emperor until 3 generations out. So if I get the land, I am assured that my grandchildren will still have the land, and at that point, they'll have to go back to the emperor to kind of re-up the deal. And if we can show that we've been good managers of this territory and we've produced a lot and we've done a good job on it for the last 3 generations, this is also a really strong case that we can make to make sure that we get it back, right? You don't want to be a bad steward of your investment. You want to go at it and you want to make sure that you're doing really well and your kid does really well and your grandkid does really well, so that they can go to the emperor and go, look, we've had this plot for 3 generations, we've increased the profits, we've always paid our taxes, we've been doing what we need to do, can we have this land back? The emperor is much more likely to say, yeah, you've actually done a really good job, here you go, keep that land. All right, this is going to help. Now, it's not going to fix all of the problems, but it is going to help. The land situation is not done yet, though. We'll come back to the land in a little bit. Now, another thing that comes out of this period of time is another important document. And it's called the Nihon Shoki. It gets published in the year 720. This is the Chronicles of Japan. This is the first attempt at writing a full historical account of Japanese history. Now, it also does go way back into the same kind of mythological past as the Kojiki did, but it's much more up to date, especially with the addition of lots of historical records, and especially household records and establishing generational lineages and things like that. So the Nihon Shoki actually ends up becoming the more important of the 2 documents. The Kojiki actually goes through a period of time where it's almost lost in history. It came out in 3 volumes. And the first volume, which is like the mythological history stuff, was the most popular of the 3. But volumes 2 and 3, we have very, very few copies of those. And we really only got lucky that printing presses showed up in Japan when they did, because this is what allowed for people to make copies of the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki. But the oldest copies of the Kojiki that we have are from like the 1500s, when this thing has been around, 700 years longer than that. So the Nihon Shoki, though, is much more important. It's much more thorough, and it goes all the way up to the modern time. So it doesn't stop in the 500s. It goes all the way up until the 700s, where they were. So this is a big, important document, really important for learning historical stuff about Japan. Also, if you want to find this, you can go find this in translation online with a quick Google search if you really want to. So Gensho does some stuff, is doing pretty well, kind of rolling her way, but there's a bit of a stir, and this is mostly because Monmu's sons are now old enough to be emperor on their own right. So Gensho doesn't get forced out of the position, but it's pretty clear that she's not going to be able to fully have unilateral authority here to not pick her nephew. You're gonna have to pick your nephew as your heir, and you're going to have to let the guy back on the throne, because he's waited now 2 imperial reigns. But it is notable that we get this lady to lady, empress to empress moment here. That actually does happen again in just a little bit, because this, again, is just a very interesting time. But when Gensho decides to step down, it is Shomu that takes over. So he is the son of Monmu. He's the nephew of Gensho and the grandson of Genmei. Now, he looks like this. Bum, ba, bum. This, by the way, is a folded up fan. He's not just holding a random stick. This is his go to Horty jail stick, right? His bonk stick. No, it's a fan that's folded up, um, wearing his, katana because he's a powerful figure. Lots of poofy, very powerful. Pretty cool dude. Anyway, what's up with this guy? Well, unfortunately for him, he takes over, by the way, 724, and he has a fairly long rule until 749. He was very young when he took over, though, right? Not like a kid, but, late teens, early 20s. So, unfortunately for him, one of the first things that happens in his rule is a really horrible smallpox epidemic. And this is going to start on some of these little islands over here, because the smallpox epidemic had started over here in China and spread into Korea. And Japanese fishermen that are taking shelter from storms on some of these islands here run into Koreans that are infected with smallpox, and they bring it back to the island here of Kyushu. That's not good. Now, this starts in 735, but by 737, it had spread to Shikoku, and it had spread all the way up to the imperial capital. Now, Shomu is not going to end up catching it himself, but multiple members of the Daijokan do catch it, and half of his cabinet are going to die from smallpox. That's a pretty big blow to his regime, but that's not the worst part of it. This particular smallpox epidemic that lasts from 735 to 737 is estimated to kill a third of the population of Japan. And this is, of course, going to much more heavily fall on the lower class people, especially the poor working farmer people, right? That don't get a lot of nutrition. They are tired all the time anyway. This is a big blow to the Japanese world. Now, I really can't explain how bad this is in a way that we could understand. We just lived through a COVID pandemic, right? And COVID killed, like, if we look at percentages of the population of America, like single digit percentages, which it was bad. I'm not trying to say that wasn't bad. That was horrible. We could have saved a lot of those people's lives. Imagine if that was 35% of the population instead of 1 or 2% of the population. Imagine 3 people that you know, and then one of them dying, right? Like, all the people that you know, group them into threes and then kill one of them, right? This is a gigantic pandemic or epidemic that just wipes out Japan. And this is going to exacerbate a lot of problems. Number one, the Emperor Shunmu is going to recognize, like, look, we've got big problems here. I can't expect these people who are my nobles in places like Kyushu to pay taxes at the same rate. Some of these people lost their entire farm. Like, everybody that worked on their farm, dead. What do? Like, I literally can't go work my fields. I cannot pay taxes. So Shomu, as a sign of goodwill, starts canceling taxes for a while. Right? So this is like his eviction ban. We're not going to kick you out of your territory. Just do what you can, get back on your feet as soon as you can. When it spreads to Shikoku, he continues to do tax exemptions. When it gets to Honshu, he continues to do tax exemptions. Eventually, what ends up happening is, by the end of the pandemic, some people had not been paying taxes for 2 years. And this runs the government out of money because nobody's paying taxes. So that's a big issue. Big issue. Also, people freak the crap out. Like, they literally have end of the world. Well, let me just show you here. Nope, wrong. Yep. they invent things like this. So this is a wood block that comes from a little bit later, but these things up here are actually smallpox demons, right? So these are demons that represent smallpox. Now, this guy right here is Minamoto no Tametomo, and you probably don't have any idea who that guy is because we haven't covered him yet. He's a big, important dude in like the late 1000s in Japan. But there's a story about him fighting off smallpox demons. But I picked this to show you because like they invented personified versions of smallpox so that they could then go, kind of visually fight them. It's bad. They think that this is the end of the world. And what ends up happening as a result of that, when the piece of art is stunning, when is that wood block from? Tad, that particular image, oops, sorry. Let me go back. This one is probably from the late 1700s or early 1800s. I can't tell you specifically. I probably should have been able to do that, and I apologize for not being able to do so. I got this, by the way, from Wikimedia Commons. So you can go find the same image, and it might have some additional information about the origin of it. He's an actual demon slayer. Also, hey, Tag, good to see you. You all know that sometimes I hang out on chat and build Gundams. If you like watching me do that, go follow my bud Tad, who also does that, and builds the cool Gundam stuff and listens to good music while he does it. Very good taste in music, so go give Tad a follow. If that's from 1200, wow. Yeah. So that's from a lot later after they figured out like the multi-block pressing and stuff like that. So, yeah. But anyway, when everybody thinks that it's the end of the world and everybody thinks that they're going to die, well, it's time to go to church, right? And you get this big thing, the Todaiji Kondo. This is a gigantic Buddhist temple that is in Nara. This is commissioned during this period of time because guess what? We got to start praying. These demons are coming from the bad part of the world, and the demons are coming to attack us, and the way to get rid of them is to make sure that we're praying. And to do that, we're going to build these real big temples. You can fit a lot of souls in that mother, right? Padding it on the roof. Now, inside of this is actually something that's fairly famous, and you might have actually seen this. This is the Nara Todaiji Daibatsu, which is a gigantic statue of Buddha, which also comes from this period of time. Buddha, save us. We have been bad. We have sinned. We need some salvation. We're going to go pray. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful building. Absolutely stunning architecture. Now, let me be clear here. The footprint and the design of this is original, but the materials, this particular building has been rebuilt. So this is not this is kind of a Ship of Theseus situation here, where it's not the original materials anymore. It's been reinforced with more modern stuff. This is original, though. This particular big statue here is the Daibutsu. So during this period of time, also, Buddhism gets the official sanction, the official thumbs up from the emperor. Shomu goes, we really need to get on board with this Buddhism stuff. Like we gotta start praying. We gotta start reading the sutras. We gotta start reciting them. We gotta start doing what we need to do, because this is the way that we're going to get out from under all of these, this gigantic issue. Now, in 737, when things calm down, it looks like things are going okay for a little while. But if we're really being honest, things were not okay. The population was wrecked. A third of the population is dead. And again, this is disproportionately affecting lower class working people. Food is real low. Now, if we remember going all the way back to Empress Gensho, food was already kind of an issue. Now it's going to be a real issue. And the government has no money. So if the government doesn't have any money and we're on the backside of the pandemic, what are we going to do? Well, you raise taxes. And of course, this doesn't sit very well with the nobility, who had just been convinced, hey, we need to go work this land some more. So Shomu has to come up with some new ways to sort of spur land reclamation. And this is going to be sort of a fateful decision that echoes through time, because he's going to set up a system that turns into something called the Shoen system. And this is basically going to dominate Japanese land management for the next 1,000 years. It's that important. So here's the way that this works. Certain pieces of land were attached to temples and shrines. And in a situation where the temple or the shrine was big enough to have a monastery, it was very common for the monks that lived in the monastery to work the land. And that land was considered tax-free because it was owned and operated by religious individuals. So even in Japan, you kind of have this separation of church and state situation going on here with land taxes. Now, as a way to encourage land reclamation, one of the things that Shomu does is going to be expanding the land attached to these locations. So if there's a shrine that might have, like 1/2 acre attached to it, that's all that the shrine really needs, right? There's going to be maybe one person there that's the caretaker of this particular shrine. Their job is basically keep the grounds clean, make sure that people can go visit the shrine. What's going to happen is that maybe 1/2 acre is going to get expanded to 100 acres. And because this is attached to this shrine, it's going to be tax-free. And then as a gift from the emperor to a noble, the emperor can allow you to use this land tax-free. Because the bigger issue was, we have no food, we are going to starve before we can pay taxes. This is also going to allow the nobles to feel freer in paying taxes because they know that they have a big tax write-off that they can use to keep their lifestyle up, right? If you're worried that you're going to have to sell the farm to stay in the nice house, you're probably not going to pay taxes. But if you know you've got a nice little tax shelter, then you're going to be much more free with paying your taxes. Also, if you don't pay your taxes, the emperor can take away your little tax haven. So this is sort of a win-win situation, but it's also one that is still tenuously based on the idea that the emperor is in control. Over time, this is going to muddy the waters a lot. The Shoen system is going to become the way that the nobility are going to end up becoming more powerful in Japan, because they're just going to keep glomming on more tax-free land. But it's an interesting concept. And this does help a little bit, but it doesn't help a lot. Now, if you'll remember me saying that 4 members of the Daijo Khan ended up dying, well, they were all, and this is perhaps just bad luck, but all 4 of them were from a particular clan called the Fujiwara clan. And the Fujiwara clan had been a very powerful group that had sort of pushed their way into the upper echelons of society back during the 7th century. But Shomu was not necessarily super familiar or likes a lot of them. Was the position of shogun doesn't exist? No, at this particular point, no, it doesn't. But that's coming in just a little bit. We will get the first shoguns in this stream. So the Fujiwara clan lost 4 members of the Daijokan, which was like half the cabinet. And then when Shomu is rebuilding his cabinet, he doesn't pick anybody from Fujiwara because he didn't really like them. Of course, this was a giant slap in the face. They went from having 4 people on the ministerial board to 0. That's a really big slap in the face. So what happens? They rebel. They're down on the island of Kyushu. They're going to rise in, and they're going to say that what's happening is that they're rising in protest of this new shift towards Chinese ideology. And they're going to try to kind of cloak their rebellion in an not necessarily anti-Buddhist, but that they feel like the Buddhism that had been promoted was overriding the natural traditional religion of Japan, right? You're eliminating our heritage, our tradition. Not that Buddhism was all bad, but Buddhism had started already blending with the local Shinto religious ideology, but the religion that had been pushed was just pure, Buddhism. So they're going to kind of be populist. We're going to make our religion great again, if you kind of will. And they're going to rise up against the emperor and demand that he reinstate all of this stuff and then put them in charge so that they could oversee it. Let's be real clear here. They were just ticked that they lost 4 positions on the ministerial board. The shogun position had not been included in the Kama Sutra at this point. The Kama Sutra at this point had actually been quite well finalized and was actually being drawn out in pretty graphic depiction already in India. The Kama Sutra is actually quite a lot older than you might think it is. It goes all the way back to at least around the 1000s of the BC period. Is when you first start seeing some of that stuff being written out or drawn down. So, there you go. I believe it doesn't exist to this day, which is a shame. Kama Sutra stream. I don't think that I could show any of those photos. I'm pretty sure that would be massively against TOS. Anyway, so the Fujiwara are going to rebel. They're going to say, we're gonna bring all this stuff back and brr, 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 brr. It doesn't go very well for them. Shomu actually beats the crap out of them, and they get humiliated pretty badly. And what he's going to end up doing for the next few years of his reign is that he's actually going to make a tour of the empire, especially this southern part down in here, because the emperors never really left the capital city. But he decides, I'm going to go see and be seen. And I'm going to make sure that everybody knows who's in charge down here. And I'm going to make sure that everybody gets to speak their piece, right? If you've got an issue, I'm in your backyard, so you come and say it. Don't do a rebellion. No. You don't get to say that I never came to talk to you, because I'm literally leaving the capital to come see you in your house. So I'm watching you. And for a little while, he actually moves the capital further down this way for just a couple of years, so that he can kind of like eyeball these people down there in the south and go, hey, still watching. Be careful. Now, this is a big flex. This, of course, is him like doing his thing. And it works. For the most part, everybody kind of calms down. But things aren't necessarily purely good. And in 749, when he decides to give up the throne, it is to another lady, Empress Koken. So you're saying Biden should move the capital to Mar-a-Lago? No. I would not say that. I don't think... I mean, that would be really funny. That would be really hilarious. I don't even know what I would do with that. This guy's coming down here to my house. I don't know what he's doing. Every time I look around, he's there. He's there. I don't know why he's there. I don't know why Biden is coming down here. Anyway, this is Empress Cooking. She looks rather dour. And she kind of is. She's got a very interesting rule, Empress Cooking does. This is going to be a fun story here. So, she's in power the first time, because hint, there's a second time, from 749 to 758. So almost 10 years. When she takes over, a lot of people are like, wait. I thought we were done with empresses. I thought we were going to go with emperors. Aren't there emperors to pick? And there were not really good emperor options to pick, so they ended up with an empress, and a lot of the nobles were like, look, dude, I don't really like the way that a lot of this is going. We should just rebel. She has to fight off multiple assassination attempts, not like physically. She's not like, physically fighting off these things. There are multiple attempts at coups. There are multiple rebellions, and she's capable of surviving all of them. She defeats all of the enemies and manages to try to win some of these people back to her side by giving them more tax-free land, right? So she's increasing this show and stuff. But she realizes that it's kind of going to be hard for her to continue ruling if she doesn't have a male heir. So she finds one of her cousins, who's this kid, and goes, look, he's my heir, and when things happen, when I die or I decide to retire, he'll be emperor. And this pacifies some people, but a lot of people are still just really not pleased with her reign. She had become very, very familiar with a lot of big Buddhist figures, especially some of these big priests that were at these big temples in Nara. And they were kind of getting a lot of influence over both her and even sometimes the government. And a lot of people were just very uncomfortable with her reign. So she kind of decides that while this kid, this cousin of hers, is still young, that she's going to put him on the throne for a little while just to use as a puppet, right? So she's going to retire and put this kid on the throne and then sort of run the country through him. And this is where we're going to get Emperor Junin. So we've got an emperor. Now, Empress Koken is not technically empress anymore, but she's the one running the country. Now, things are going to get really weird here. Because when she puts this kid on the throne, the Fujiwara are immediately going to go, well, we totally support him and we don't support you. This is problematic. Because the Fujiwara clan, again, was very big and very powerful. Junin probably doesn't have any actual power to do anything on his own. He's a figurehead. He's a puppet. So here's this young kid that's got one of the biggest clans in Japan saying, yes, we support you being emperor, but, living in the same house as him is his cousin who hates his guts and is trying to run the country in his name. Things get really squirrely here. And what ends up happening is that the Fujiwara are going to rebel against the government to make sure that the emperor can run the government. And you're like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, how do you rebel against an empress that's not even an empress? Well, it's just a really messy situation. So Fujiwara hopes that what happens here is that they can get rid of former Empress Koken, and they're going to be able to maybe force her into exile or force her into a monastery or something like that so that she's no longer a threat, and that Junin can actually run the country by himself, which is basically let the Fujiwara run the country through him, right? This is all like shell game politics here. It doesn't work very well for the Fujiwara. They lose again, and their clan leader gets sent off into exile. And at this point, Koken is kind of tired of dealing with her cousin, so she is going to depose her cousin. She's going to retake the throne herself, and she's going to change her name to Shotoku. Now, this is a pretty big flex, because Shotoku was a guy from the previous century, and that guy was responsible for the beginnings of the reforms that put the imperial clan at the head of the government in the first place. So what she's doing here is she's saying, I'm going to call back. You know, remember when the emperors got super powerful? That was because of Shotoku. Guess who's back? Shotoku. And they're like, but you're not him. She's like, it's my name, and I'm going to do what I darn well please. This doesn't go very well. There is a Buddhist monk, and his name is Dokyo. Yeah, she's going retro. This monk's name is Dokyo, and he was a really big, powerful monk at some of these churches or these temples in Nara. And he is supposedly going to be able to have all of these miraculous powers. And at one point, when Shotoku / Koken gets sick, he heals her of her ailment. And this is going to get him in really good with the Empress. And if we believe some versions of the history, he gets in really good with the Empress, as in they become secret lovers. Now, this is super big faux pas, because number one, he's a monk. Number two, she's the Empress. And Empress don't be having relations with common folk. That's just not how it works. So that's bad enough. Now, she also starts promoting him. She basically puts him at the head of all Buddhists in Japan. And then after a few years, she promotes him to the head position of the Daijoken. Like that kind of quasi-VP position that I was talking about. He's not of a noble family. He's just a monk that just happens to be in real good with the Empress. And now he's the second most powerful political figure in Japan, technically. This doesn't sit very well, especially because he has designs. He's got big plans. The story goes that he went to a particular shrine where they were very famous for doing predictions. They were going to be able to give good omens about things, like, is this a good idea, yes or no? And he bribed these particular officials at this shrine to say that the country would witness a period of peace and unforetold previous prosperity if he were to be made emperor. Because here's an interesting thing about Empress Shotoku. She doesn't have any kids, so she's got no heirs. And Dokyo goes, I could be emperor. So, according to this particular story, it seems like Dokyo had actually convinced the Empress to literally marry him and make him emperor. This doesn't sit well at all. Okidokyo, right? That would have been a good one. I went with Daft Monk instead because he's a monk and he was kind of crazy because he had these crazy ideas. So Daft Monk sounded right to me. But Okidokyo would have been a good one too, and I should have probably thought about that ahead of time. I'd try to run the potential stream titles by both my wife and the guys in the mod chat if I can't figure out good ones. Anyway, so what happens? Well, before all of this stuff hits, she ends up dying. And when she dies, the nobles collectively decide, no. So she doesn't end up being able to get him into position to be emperor. And when she dies, he gets pushed out of all of the power. And the nobles collectively decide, all right, we're really not doing women anymore. Like, no more empresses. We're not doing the woman ruler for a while, at least. Like, where's a man in the imperial household? It doesn't matter where he is in the imperial line. So, what up, 8 p.m.? Yeah, I said that was a bit of a Freudian slip there. We're not doing empresses as the head of state anymore. I apologize. But for those of you that are not familiar with my friend, 8 p.m. is like, no, I quit. You gotta go give my friend 8 p.m. a follow. This dude is a great artist. Has one of the most amazing energies on stream. It's hard to even describe. You just have to experience it to know what it is. It has a palpable hue of excitement, if you will pardon the weirdness. What's up, Erwin? We've got other friends in chat. Erwin is a friend here on Twitch that builds amazing Minecraft worlds that you can go explore around in. And you should go give Erwin a follow and watch Erwin build really cool stuff. Like gardens. Who would have thought that building a garden in Minecraft is a soothing thing to do? It is. It actually is. You're totally a match for my audience. Absolutely. People love Minecraft. It's a cool thing. So go give Erwin a follow and show her some love. Dokyo Ono broke up the band. He did. Daria's like, no, boo, we gotta have women, right? So how likely is it that all of these bad stories about her were exaggerated by men who wanted to say no more empresses? Green Herring, that's a fair question to ask. If it weren't for all of the sources kind of lining up on this and them all telling more or less the same story and not contradicting themselves on the big points, and the fact that we have some minor external sources from all of this stuff, I would say it could be a lot of slander. I think this is probably fairly accurate to what happened, though. Especially with the rise of Buddhism at this time. Now, if we look at the craft of the narrative, we might find some situations here. Like, did Dokyo actually go bribe these particular religious figures to give this thing? Maybe. That might be made up. But was he in the position? Oh, yeah, he was. Because we've got lots of evidence of things that, like, he, had his influence in, and lots of stuff that, like, very, very mundane details that you wouldn't expect if somebody was making up a really big coup, unless they were going really, really detailed. Like, we're going to make this guy look horrible. Somebody go invent 10 years of tax records with this guy's name on it, right? Like, that's usually not how far people go if they're going to slander somebody, historically speaking. That would be a really good frame if they framed him for a lot of this stuff. I'm doing well, Erwin. How are you? But Green Herring, that is absolutely a fair question to ask, and one that is not outside of the realm of possibility in previous situations, or even partially in this situation. But I think this one is pretty close to to the reality, because we don't get an empress again for a while. So who do we get? Well, this guy. This guy is Emperor Konin. And what's interesting about him is that they were looking for a male. They were like, we need a male in the imperial household. Who's left? And they're like, not many. And they found this guy, who's a cousin of one of the emperors from like the early 600s. And they're like, we've got this guy he's in the imperial family. He's in the imperial family, but he's not really from the main line of the imperial family. And the nobles were like, is he a he? And they're like, oh yeah, he's definitely a he. And they're like, get him. Conan was 62 though. Like, he had just basically been living his life, doing his thing on a kind of a, I mean, he was rich, right? He was from the imperial family, but he was never going to be in politics. He was never going to run the show. He was never going to be like, even a minister of the Daijōkan, right? He's just cousin so-and-so that's like 40th in line to the throne. 62 years old, and they go, hi, would you like to be emperor? And he's like, is this one of those weird hidden camera shows where it's like you're going to pop out of the bushes and be like, ha, we got you. And they're like, no, for real, do you want to be emperor? And he's like, I mean, I wasn't doing anything today, so I guess. So he gets put on the throne. Did they have a reason to hate the empresses so much? In effect, no. If we look at Genmei and Gensho, the two previous empresses, their reigns were both positive effects in Japanese history. If we look at the overall trajectory of Koken/Shotoku, things weren't necessarily getting that bad, but they weren't necessarily getting that good either. It's very much kind of a flat status quo kind of situation. The biggest issue here is that the nobility wanted to make sure that the line of succession was intact. This comes from a very strong Confucian belief that had been promoted pretty heavily inside of Japan, that the emperors and the imperial line was sort of sacrosanct, right? Like, you can't touch the imperial line. There had only ever been one clan since the beginning of the imperial line that had been emperor, and you have to make sure that this is the emperor because this is what heaven has decided, right? The powers of the universe have put this particular clan in power, and we want to make sure that they're in power. And when Dokyo, this weird non-imperial guy, got this close to being emperor, that freaked a lot of people out because he was not anywhere close to the imperial line at all. He had no real right to be that way. And in Japanese society, it was a lot easier to push around women than it was to push around men. And a lot of people felt like if you end up in this situation where there's an empress who doesn't have an heir, some powerful noble can force their way into a relationship, have a kid who would then be the heir, and in that way they would effectively hijack the imperial line for themselves. And that was something that none of the nobles wanted to risk because they couldn't guarantee it was them, right? If they could have, like, if one noble family could have guaranteed that it was them, like the Fujiwara, they would have been all over having an empress as long as they could make sure that she married a Fujiwara and had a little Fujiwara heir, right? But because the nobles couldn't guarantee that the right one of them would get power, they really wanted to make sure that the imperial line was going to be a man. And it's a lot easier to convince him to have lots of wives than it is for one woman to have lots of men. Because in the Japanese world, polygyny, where you have multiple wives for the emperor, was perfectly fine, right? So there was a much better chance of you getting one of your daughters to be the imperial concubine or have a kid that would one day go on to be heir than it was for you to try to find a situation that wouldn't work. Like polyandry wasn't something that Japanese people were doing at all. So to the political structure at the time, it was more beneficent to make sure that they had an emperor that could pass on the throne to the imperial family, and that would be more accessible through multiple wives so that they could hope, basically, that one of their family members could get in. And I know that's not treating women like they're actually individuals that are capable of ruling, and I don't believe that there's anything about a woman that makes her incapable of ruling a country. I'm fabulously shocked that we haven't had a female president in America yet. We're one of the few westernized countries that just decided that that doesn't work for whatever reason. But anyway, in Japan, it was just a very, very androcentric world. Men were the dominating power of politics, and that's just kind of the way that it was. But that's a fair question. Also, go go follow Nixolotl, because you can watch animation that will blow your mind, and you can get some really cool art too at the same time, because Nixa does the art and then animates it. Really cool stuff. I also think the fact that women were seen as lower ranked than men, that relied on offspring of the men. Right. Yeah. Erwin, that's absolutely part of it. Absolutely part of it. That women in most ancient cultures, especially once civilization started, women were considered property of their husbands or their family. And this is very much the case in Japan. Women at that time were attached to a clan, and that clan was run by a male. It's just the way that it worked. Men do like to mess stuff up. We do. And then we like to mess stuff up and then blame somebody else. So that's kind of tactic here. All right, but we got Emperor Conan. And Conan's going to take over in 770. To be fair, we are one of the few Western countries that don't have a lot of things, like universal health care, guaranteed parental leave, etc., etc. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Daria, I do my best not to do that. I'm not saying that I never do, because I'm capable of screwing stuff up, but I know I'm just one dude. I'm not the worst dude. I screw stuff up, but I don't think that I'm the worst dude. Anyway, so what's up with this guy? Anyway, he's 62. He's got multiple kids. He's got multiple wives. And the lady that he decides is going to be his empress apparently doesn't really get along with him very well, because there's a question about who he's going to pick as his heir. He's got multiple sons, and he's considering this other son as the heir. And then he finds out that his wife, the empress, had hired some magicians to put a curse on him. And this is like big bad no-no. Like you don't do the cursing of the emperor. The black magic is just completely out of it. And so he goes, when Conan finds out that he had been the target of a curse by his wife, he goes, okay, no. So first off, you are no longer the empress. And your son, who was theoretically going to be the heir, is also not a prince anymore. You are both reduced to commoner status, and you are placed in house arrest. And he leaves them in house arrest for about 2 years before they die. Now, here's the question. Did they die of starvation, or did somebody that was in tight with the emperor go in and kill them? Because there are some rumors that the Fujiwara clan, who had been kind of squirreling their way back into power, did this as a way to kind of get back in good favor with the emperor. Like, hey, we took care of that problem of your ex-wife and your son who, did that curse thing on you. But this doesn't turn out well for Conan, because he thought, I've got rid of the problem, things are going to be okay. And then all these natural disasters start happening. Like there are droughts and there are plagues. And the people are like, oh, Emperor, dude, you is cursed. You is totally cursed. And you probably should not have had your family killed, even if they did curse you, because now the gods are real mad at you. And he's like, I didn't do anything. Like, I didn't do anything. Alas. I'm missing chat. But we do have things that other Western countries... We do have things that other Western countries have. Okay, no, I'm sorry. We have things that other Western countries don't have, like high numbers of gun-related deaths. True. You've made your career messing stuff up. APM, I feel like if you can fail your way to success, just keep on failing, my friend. All right. We also have way more tacos than most countries. This is true, Tuna. And tacos are good. Tacos are good. This is something of a tragedy. Everyone should be able to enjoy tacos, right? You have been waiting for us to get to Conan. Not Conan, Conan. Sounds like a bit of everything to me, just knowing anything. Ooh, sounds like a bit of everything to me. Without knowing anything, then you just tell us nothing. Or tell us now. Yeah, sure, right? So, there's this question of whether or not this guy was the target of divine retribution. That, you know, he got cursed, which is bad, and then he responded the wrong way, and he killed his family, which is like real bad. Sorry, there's a mosquito. You little booger. I hate mosquitoes. I'm looking forward to the cold temperatures when they will all die and go to the hot place where they all certainly deserve. Who tells if this is a curse or not? Nobody really knows. I mean, may as well be a curse, though, because he was cursed. People are superstitious in the ancient world. I mean, people today are superstitious. But even more so in the ancient world. Anyway, when this guy dies, he is going to have to pick a son to pass the throne to, because we got to have guys on the throne. And we end up with this guy named Emperor Kamu, who looks like this. He's in color. Look, he's got a big old hat. Emperor Kamu. He's sitting on a throne. He's got a very nice beard here. Like you got to think that he trims that to be pointy, right? I don't think I could grow a beard that long. Mine would get curly and start looking weird. But anyway, this is Emperor Kamu. Is that wood that he's got in his hands? Again, this is a big folded fan. So that if he gets hot, he can kind of like break out the fan. Not a very puffy wardrobe, but ironically, based on our metaphor of puffy equals power, this dude's actually the most powerful emperor that we've talked about today. This dude's a big deal. He rules from 781 to 806, and he's got a lot of stuff going for him. So he's going to be the end of the Nara period. And also the last guy that we'll talk about on stream tonight. He decides that it's time to move the capital again. And he does this because he's worried about the influence that these big Buddhist temples and these big powerful Buddhist figures were having over the government. And this actually is a lot of evidence that sort of, like, because Green Herring asked, was this whole thing made up to kind of slander, Koken / Shotoku? But I think this is a piece of evidence here that speaks to the potential authenticity of that. Because the power base of the Buddhist leadership at this time had become so powerful that Kamu decides we need to get away from it. We just need to go to a new capital. We need to ditch all of these big temples and move away from all of these big leadership positions because they've got to stay here to run their temples, right? We're going to move the government away. And he moves the capital to a new city called Nagoka in 784, and this is going to end the Nara period. But he's not done. When he moves the capital, there are a whole bunch more natural disasters. There's like a big flood, there's a whole bunch of torrential rain and some mudslides and an earthquake, and people are like, you're ticking off the gods again. You insulted the whole world here. We were all Buddhist. Everything was going okay. Your family starts messing stuff up. You're just out of luck. One of his Fujiwara supporters gets assassinated, and they're like, told you, look at there. Yep, you're just messing it up. You're just messing it up. And he goes, okay, look, let's be for real here. I'm the emperor. I'm in charge. What we gonna do? Well, we're going to start beating the junk out of people. Specifically, we're going to twist a little bit of the religious focus and bring in some new religious ideology here. Specifically, a new imperialized version of Confucianism. So Buddhism's still there, Shinto is also still there, but for the imperial goals, we're going to start influencing this particular version of Confucianism. And this particular version is sort of a global Confucianist viewpoint. And what it says is that not only has the emperor been chosen by heaven to sit on the throne, that heaven has given territorial authority over all of the world to the emperor. And this is a subtle but an important shift here. If the emperor goes from just being the one chosen by heaven to rule Japan, okay, cool. But if it's chosen by heaven to rule everything that he can take over, that's a different story. And this is where we start seeing Japan begin to expand, especially up here into the northern part of the big island of Honshu. Up here, there were people that they called barbarians. And Kamu is going to decide to launch lots of big military attacks against them. And to do so, he's going to promote the first people to the position of shogun. So the word shogun roughly translates to great general to subdue the barbarians. So I, as emperor, am going to bestow this particular military position to one of my generals so that he can go up to the north and beat up those barbarians so that we can expand the imperial throne across all of the world. And when he does this, it starts working. And when it starts working, he goes, I'm not cursed. I moved the capital because I'm in the right. And I'm in the right because we're winning. We're beating the crap out of these guys. We're expanding. I'm bringing riches in. I'm opening up more land. I am opening up territory for my nobles that are going to be reliable and noble and loyal to me. And I'm going to run this show the right way. And people are like, well, crap. I mean, I guess he's actually kind of right. Now, to afford all of these new military activities that he's going to do, he's also going to overhaul the way that the military works. Instead of having one big military that is paid for, supplied, and outfitted by the emperor, he's going to shift this burden onto the individual territorial governors. And again, these are his nobles that he's chosen, and he's going to say, here's the deal. You all are each responsible for a certain number of troops from your territory based on your population. And he's going to do a really big census, actually, which is pretty fantastic. If you are really fascinated by how many cows live in this area or how many fields are in this particular farm, it's that level of super nitty-gritty census. If you're familiar with the Doomsday Book from England, it's the same kind of concept, but over here in Japan. And he does this so that he can say, you, territory so-and-so, are responsible for fielding certain number of archers, certain number of horseback fighters, certain number of samurai, etc., etc. And he's doing this so that the imperial household doesn't have to support the burden of all of this money anymore. Because It turns out that when you give a lot of land to the nobles that they don't have to pay taxes on, it hurts your tax base and you can't keep up the military. But as a way to control the amount of money that your nobles can, hold up and stockpile, you shift the burden down to them, and then they have to pay for it, which keeps them kind of on the keep, right? Because they have to spend all that surplus that they are hoarding away on keeping up the military, because he's going to be sending you out to go fight the barbarians all the time. Now, it's a pretty smart move here. It's going to blow up in the faces of the emperors in a couple hundred years, but he doesn't see that coming because he dies, in 806, and that's the end of his reign. But this is the Nara period of Japan. It's a fascinating period of time. A lot of little seeds of future issues are going to get planted during this period, and I think it's one of the more important formative periods of Japanese history. All boils down to everyone's honesty. Yeah, as long as you're being honest, it's going to be okay. The thing is, humans aren't honest. Spoiler alert, they're not so honest all the time. But that is all for me tonight. Now, of course, if anybody has questions, I know Green Herring, I know it's crazy. People don't tell the truth. The number of students that I have that cheat on things is evidence enough of that. What up, Noger? Good to see you, man. I see you sneaking in there at the end. Noger trying to be all sneaky. Everybody go follow Noger because he's a ridiculously intelligent individual that can take really complex ideas and break them down for you, specifically in the realm of philosophy. So if you want to know about philosophy, go hang out with Noger. You'll probably see me there. You might see Vipers there. You might see Aristotle hanging around there. Don't speak the truth. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, so if anybody has any point redemptions that you want to do, or if you've got, if anybody wants to contribute to the group goal that's still running, I extended it, so I'll just keep extending that until it gets full. So don't worry about that. Do we know very much about those northern barbarians, or just what the Imperial Japanese had to say? Tad, unfortunately, it's the latter. We know a little bit about them from their oral traditions. A lot of those people were the Ainu. If you're familiar with the sort of indigenous peoples of Japan, it's Ainu. Here, I can type it in chat here. The Ainu, they're going to be a lot of the people that live up in the north, but there are also other just people that are up there that are related to the Japanese by heritage and ethnicity, but not under the individual leadership of the emperor. So some of these are, people that came over with the original big migrations to the area. A lot of these are people that came over from the second big wave of Korean migrations. So if you want to know more about the Ainu, we actually did a stream about them and Japan as a viewer request stream. It's the Japanese and Ainu mythology. Really fascinating group of people up there. And we know a little bit about them because they're still around today, but textually speaking, they don't have any of their own histories. So as a way of determining how they lived and what they're doing, we have to rely on archaeology. And unfortunately, the Japanese government today treats the Ainu people very similar to the way that the United States government treats Native Americans. And especially when it comes to their archaeological sites and things like that, they're not particularly interested in spending money to develop a lot of these sites. And when they do, the data that gets released is very highly sanitized and politicized. Japan is pretty stringent about who they let do archaeological work inside the country, and they definitely do not like people publishing things without their eyeballs on it first. So it's unfortunate that we don't know more about these native peoples. Historically speaking, they left behind just physical culture remains. They have oral histories that stretch back to this period, but we end up in that same situation where, the oral histories almost certainly have some level of truth, but we can't tell exactly how much it has. So we have to kind of be wary about how much we adopt that as factual history. So we know a lot, but not as much as we probably could have under different situations, if that makes any sense. So, oh, yeah, Soup, no problem, absolutely. I love this. This is what I do. This is kind of my thing. Well, I mean, it actually literally is my thing, but... All right. Anybody else got any questions or comments or point stuff? Otherwise, we can go do a bit of a raidy raid. Because I'm actually quite tired. It's been a long day. Quite a long day. Anybody else got any questions? Questions. All right. Well, I am going to do my best to have a viewer request stream on this coming Tuesday. The topic is Teddy Roosevelt. I have that most of the way ready and prepped, so I should be able to finish that up over the weekend. So we should be able to have that on Tuesday. And then Thursday, we will pick up with Korean and Northern Asian history during the 8th century. Cool stuff. You're going to want to listen and hang out and have a good time with the rest of us. But if that is what we've got, we are going to go do a bit of a raid, and we're going to go raid friend of the stream, The Damage, who is currently working on some artwork, and we'll go show him some love. Our battle cry is adventure. You can yell that out when we get in. Throw some of those adventure hats in the chat if you got them. I hope that I can do some stuff over the weekend when it comes to doing some Gundam stuff. I've got a little bit of stuff to do this weekend on just the kind of other, around the house kind of things and the family things, but maybe Sunday we can do some Gundam stuff, but definitely Tuesday. Well, I shouldn't say definitely. Almost certainly Tuesday, and then next Thursday. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again, Steve, for the big raid. Zagdraws, thanks for the follow. Hope you're having a good one. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Everybody else, thanks for hanging around. Good chat as always. And I'll see you next time. Take it easy.